role do the senses play regarding forensic science in the process of solving a crime? Now, in a crime scene investigation, the investigator must be able to use evidence and eyewitness testimonies to piece together the events of the crime and the events leading up to the crime. This, of course, requires the memory of the eyewitnesses and the recollection of such events. Human memory, however, is flawed, and it is with this that our senses play into the process. New York Times writer Thorin Klausau cites The Atlantic, in which she states, "Pattern recognition is key. Essentially, the more connections a new memory has to knowledge you have, the more likely it is you'll remember that information. Specific details are thus more likely to be remembered with pattern recognition, which can happen with our senses." Now, one of the most important senses for pattern recognition is the sense of smell. Molecular biologist and professor at the Department of Neuroscience at Columbia University, Richard Axel, writes about the significance and the wonders of the human sense of smell, in which he states that the sense of smell is the sense that brings forth memory and associations with a richness not elicited by any other sensory stimuli. The reason behind this strong correlation is the arrangement of the human body in itself, as both the sense of smell and memory are controlled by the same part of the brain, the limbic system. Now, although Richard Axel does have a point when he talks about the importance of the sense of smell, a contrasting perspective can be seen by Anna Grosso and her colleagues at the Department of Neuroscience at the University of Turin, in which they show the importance of the sense of hearing instead. They present a study performed on rats in analyzing the correlation between sense of hearing and emotional memory. A group of rats are trained to relate fear with a specific sound of electric shock, in which they present this fear by freezing up. And a month later, the researchers damaged the secondary auditory cortex of some of the rats to prevent them from hearing. When they used the sound of the electric shock this time, the rats that were able to hear the sound ended up freezing from fear much more frequently than the rats that were not able to. Anna Grosso and her colleagues then used this study to conclude that the auditory cortex participates in emotional learning by processing the sensory features of auditory stimuli paired with emotional consequences. And it is with these connections that investigators are able to get a full understanding of the past, which is seen in the episode Crocodile of the TV series Black Mirror. A futuristic world with various technological innovations is presented, one being a device that allows one's memories to be projected onto a screen. Now, in order to bring out the memories of the eyewitnesses, the investigator collects information on where they were. She discovers that the incident happened near a pub, so before using the device, she makes her witnesses take a sniff of beer. She then plays the music that was playing at the store that happened right next to the crime scene. And it is with this that the investigator realized that a very clear image of the witness's memories is projected onto the screen. Now, although an individual's senses do aid in the jogging of memory, one can never fully restore their memory, with every single detail carefully put together. To solve for this, we can look straight to technology. As technology continues to evolve, the process of solving a crime is actually becoming more and more efficient. The technology world has opened a door to a form of virtual reality, as MIT PhD student and professor Gershon DeBlanc and Joseph A. Paradiso elaborate upon in their article, Extrasensory Perception. They introduced the Doppellab, a form of virtual reality that uses sensory technology. The Doppellab can actually be used in multiple ways to aid in the process of solving a crime. With these advancements, specific events can be recreated for the witness, in which they would be able to sense the smells and hear the sounds they heard during the event of the crime. This would improve their ability to recollect specific details and help the investigator overall, because they would later be able to use that information to solve the crime. A more beneficial use of the Doppellab, however, could be through the actual recreation of events. In their article, Joseph DeBlanc and Paradiso state that the Doppellab also makes it possible to experience data recorded in the past. One can observe a moment in time from various perspectives. This form of technology would be a scientific breakthrough for forensic science, as an investigator would no longer have to worry about piecing together all the puzzles of all the missing pieces of a crime. Instead, they would be able to use this form of sensory technology to see the event for him or herself. Rather than using senses to jog memory, senses could instead be used to travel to the past in a way, and through sensory technology, and experience the events for him or herself. Of course, limitations do exist with this form of technology. The technology world opens the door to a greater risk of false convictions due to manipulation. The Doppel lab that Paradiso and Deblanc describe is actually vulnerable to the alteration of specific details, which is critical. Furthermore, due to this possible risk, society's response to the solution might be a simple no, in which they reject it altogether because of the risks. Now, although technologies such as the Doppel lab seem very perfect in an idealistic world, the actual implementation of it into society would in fact be quite strenuous. The manipulation of technology is a dangerous concept, but ultimately a risk that society must be willing to take in order to see the long-term benefits. Senses, more importantly the sense of smell and the sense of hearing, have the power to connect even the smallest of details to exact moments of the past. This is pivotal to forensic science and solving crime. The advancement of technology has opened a new world of linking senses to technology to create extrasensory perception, which ultimately has the power to give investigators all of the missing pieces to their puzzle. These technological innovations can bring great change to forensic science, which shines light to a bright future for America's criminal justice system altogether.
Okay, Ezra. What evidence, what evidence did you gather that you didn't use, and why did you choose not to use it?
Okay, so in the beginning of my presentation, I mentioned the 3D facial recognition and the automated fingerprint and identification system. As I did my research, I actually found a lot of evidence on the technology that's used in the forensic science world. However, I decided not to use this in my presentation because although my solution is technology in itself, it's a different form of technology. It's sensory technology, technology that I can relate to sensors. So although I did find evidence about the other aspect of technology included in forensic science, I decided not to use it because I realized that it wouldn't really go straight with my topic as it didn't, I wasn't able to connect it to senses specifically. So I did briefly mention it, but I didn't use any evidence on it because I decided that it would go off topic and sway away from my overall research question.
How did you use the conclusions and questions of others to advance your own research?
Okay, so this also relates with the previous answer that I gave. So while I was doing my research, I found a lot of evidence and a lot of research about technology, as I previously mentioned, because as society continues to evolve, technology is actually being incorporated into the forensic science world on a very big scale. So I found a lot of solutions that swayed to how forensic science could better overall with technological innovations. And this actually allowed me to go towards my own solution, because although I didn't use this, it helped me see that technology could be used, and I was able to connect that later on to our senses. I was able to find a correlation between all of our senses and the solutions that everyone else mentioned with technology, and I later came up with sensory technology, in which I use a stimulus package, and when I talked about the Doppel lab that Deblanc and Paradiso talk about in extrasensory perception.
Good job.